February 1945. Northern Italy. A single P-47 Thunderbolt slices downward through low cloud, dropping until it is barely 60 feet above frozen earth. Snow explodes upward beneath the propeller wash, spraying the aircraft canopy with icy mist. The pilot does not flinch. He keeps descending. Ahead, carved into the ridgeline like hidden fangs, enemy artillery positions have locked an entire Allied infantry battalion in place for 3 brutal days. Every other pilot sent against this ridge has pulled up. This one does not. What unfolds over the next 11 minutes will permanently alter how close air support is flown, and will bind one man's name forever to a new definition of calculated audacity. The Italian front in early 1945 is not a place of sweeping breakthroughs or heroic charges. It is a landscape of punishment. Mountains rise in jagged layers, forcing men and machines into narrow valleys where wind, snow, and gunfire converge. German forces understand this terrain intimately. They dig artillery into reverse slopes, positions invisible from the air yet lethal to anything moving on foot. The Gothic line has been breached, but it has not collapsed. What remains is a grinding war measured in yards, not miles. Mud, snow, and rock dictate the pace. A single German howitzer, properly hidden, can halt an entire company for days. Progress is purchased in blood. Allied air support follows doctrine. Fighters and bombers fly high, release bombs through broken cloud cover, and hope that mathematics favors the result. Precision is rare. Survival is policy. Near the village of Vignola, the U.S. Fifth Army is stalled once again. 9 German 105mm artillery pieces are stitched along a ridgeline, too steep for tanks and too exposed for infantry assault. Forward observers have marked their estimated locations on maps. Estimated is not enough. Bombs fall wide, craters scar empty hillsides. Infantrymen die in the open while guns they cannot see continue to fire. Fighter bombers attack from 1,200 feet, diving just steeply enough to glimpse targets before pulling out. It is a compromise forged by loss. Dozens of pilots have been killed flying lower. Command no longer asks for volunteers, but one pilot keeps asking why the attacks are flown that way. His name is First Lieutenant Raymond Knight. He is 23 years old. He flies P-47 Thunderbolts with the 350th Fighter Squadron, 12th Air Force, soft-spoken, raised Methodist in Texas. The kind of man who writes letters home every Sunday and reads engineering manuals in his bunk. The ground crew notices something unusual about him. He does not stride down the flight line like other pilots. He stops. He studies the ordnance. He asks about fuse delays, blast radii, fragmentation cones. Knight has flown 64 combat missions. Not the most in the squadron, but close. What sets him apart is not his kill count. It is the way he treats each sortie as a mathematical problem, one where the variables include terrain, ballistics, and human lives. On the morning of February 24th, the briefing is routine. Suspected artillery near Vignola. Standard medium-altitude attack. 2 500-pound general-purpose bombs. Weather marginal. Heavy flak expected. Knight listens. He takes notes. He says nothing. After dismissal, he approaches the operations officer with a request that skirts the edge of insubordination. He wants to fly alone. He wants to attack at treetop level. He wants to keep making passes until every gun is confirmed destroyed. The officer stares at him. Low-level attacks against dug-in flak positions are considered nearly suicidal. The P-47 is rugged, but it is not immortal. One round through the oil cooler and the engine will seize in minutes. Knight does not argue emotion. He explains logic. Bombs dropped from altitude scatter across empty hillside. The guns are camouflaged, dug deep into reverse slopes. The only way to find them is to fly low enough to see muzzle flash. The only way to kill them is to place ordnance inside the revetments, not near them. The officer does not approve the request. He does not forbid it either. He tells Knight that if he chooses to get himself killed, it will be on his own judgment. No wingman will be ordered to follow him. Knight accepts immediately. He walks to his aircraft alone. Raymond Knight was born in Houston in 1922, into a world still recovering from one war and unknowingly marching toward another. His father was a construction foreman, precise, methodical, a man who believed that mistakes were failures of planning, not fate. His mother played piano and tended a garden. Both valued discipline, education, and quiet faith. In the Knight household, problems were not feared. They were solved. Raymond was an average student in most subjects. Exceptional in mathematics and mechanical drawing. Teachers noticed the way he focused when working with his hands. He built model airplanes with obsessive care, carving balsa ribs to exact thickness, tensioning control wires until they hummed at the correct pitch. At 16, he saved enough money from odd jobs to pay for flying lessons at a grass strip outside Houston. His instructor later said that Knight approached flight differently than most students. Others wanted to feel the airplane. Knight wanted to understand it. He asked about power-to-weight ratios, stall characteristics, load factors, why flaps altered pitch moments. When war came, Knight enlisted in the Army Air Forces without hesitation, not out of anger or ideology, but out of certainty. He believed his skills would be needed. Flight training revealed something unexpected. Knight was not a natural stick-and-rudder pilot. His reflexes were steady but not instinctive. He lacked the bravado of a fighter ace. What he possessed was patience. He repeated maneuvers until thought vanished and muscle memory remained. His gunnery scores were average, his formation flying flawless, his navigation perfect. He graduated without honors and without incident. Assigned to the P-47 Thunderbolt, Knight found the aircraft that suited him. The Thunderbolt was massive, 8 tons fully. Loaded, armored cockpit, 8 .50 caliber machine guns. It could not turn like a Spitfire or climb like a Mustang, but it could absorb punishment that would destroy other aircraft. Knight loved it. He memorized every switch and gauge. He studied fuel systems, hydraulics, turbo-supercharger plumbing. He understood that survival was not about courage, it was about knowledge. By the time he arrived in Italy in late 1944, he had absorbed the lessons of pilots who did not return. Altitude was life, speed was life, surprise was life. But doctrine, he noticed, was written by men who were not in the cockpit when the flak began. High-altitude attacks were safe for pilots and ineffective for infantry. The math was simple. A 500-pound bomb dropped from 1,200 feet at 200 knots had a circular error probability measured in dozens of yards. Against a gun dug into rock, that was the same as missing. The only solution required violating every rule meant to keep pilots alive. Knight did not discuss it. He simply waited. The cloud ceiling on February 24th sits at 800 feet. Visibility is poor. Conditions that would normally cancel a close air support mission. Knight sees opportunity. He taxis out alone. Canopy locked. Engine roaring. 2 bombs beneath the wings. Full ammunition. 90 minutes of fuel. 10 miles from the target, he drops through a break in the cloud deck and levels at 200 feet. Snow-covered fields rush beneath him. He descends further. 100 feet. The ridgeline rises ahead. Then, a flash. Orange muzzle blast against white snow. Knight pushes the nose down and fires. 8 machine guns erupt. Tracers stitch across the position. Crew scatter. He pulls up, circles, confirms. Second pass. Rifle fire cracks past the canopy. Machine guns open up. Rounds punch through the wing. Knight holds steady. He releases 1 bomb. It skips, detonates inside the revetment. The gun vanishes. He moves down the ridge. 60 feet. Flak bursts above him, unable to depress their barrels. Riflemen fire wildly. Second bomb. Direct hit. Now out of bombs, Knight switches to guns. He makes pass after pass. Strafing. Suppressing. Returning. Rounds tear through his aircraft. Controls soften. Fuel drains. He compensates. By the time he pulls away, 9 positions are silent. His P-47 limps home, riddled with holes. 1 tire flat. Gear half down. He lands without calling emergency crews. The tire blows. The aircraft slews. He keeps it straight. Over 100 bullet holes are later counted. Knight files his report. 9 positions destroyed. No friendly casualties. Aircraft repairable. The operations officer did not raise his voice when Raymond Knight finished explaining what he had done. He did not need to. Silence carried the weight of disbelief more effectively than anger ever could. 9 artillery positions destroyed. 1 aircraft nearly torn apart. 0 friendly casualties. The numbers did not align with doctrine. Knight stood at attention while the officer read the report again, slower this time. Every sentence was written in the same. Restrained. Clinical tone Knight used for fuel calculations and navigation headings. No dramatization, no emphasis, just outcomes. The officer finally looked up and told Knight the truth. What he had done violated nearly every principle designed to keep fighter pilots alive. Low-altitude solo attacks were considered reckless. Multiple passes over defended positions bordered on insanity. Flying into small arms fire was not courage. It was usually a death sentence. Then the officer said something else. It worked. That was the problem. Within hours, word spread through the squadron. Ground crews passed it along in fragments. Pilots asked quiet questions. Infantry units confirmed what air photos already showed. The ridge near Vignola was silent. For the first time in days, men moved forward without artillery shells tearing into their formation. Command could not ignore results like that. Knight was awarded a medal, but the real consequence came quietly. He was no longer told how to fly close air support. He was briefed on targets and expected to find solutions. 6 days later, on March the 2nd, another call came in, this time near the village of Pra del Bianco. German forces were withdrawing north but had left behind rearguard defenses, machine gun nests, and anti-tank guns covering narrow roads and choke points. Infantry was pinned again. Knight flew alone again. Same profile, same logic, same rejection of altitude as protection. He descended until treetops blurred beneath his wings. He found the positions the same way he always did. Muzzle flashes, disturbed earth, unnatural geometry in the landscape. He destroyed 5 machine gun nests and 3 anti-tank guns in under 15 minutes. His aircraft returned shredded. Hydraulic pressure nearly gone. Control response sluggish. This time, the engine quit while taxiing. The Thunderbolt rolled to a stop on momentum alone. No one laughed. No one celebrated. They simply refueled and patched what they could. By now, command understood something uncomfortable. Knight's success could not be easily replicated. Other pilots tried his methods and failed. Some pulled out early. Some misjudged angles. Some lacked the patience to reset attacks methodically. They had bravery. Knight had calculation. Doctrine depends on averages. Knight was not average. He did not fly by instinct or aggression. He flew by geometry, timing, and a ruthless assessment of probability. Command stopped trying to turn his actions into rules. Instead, they studied them as exceptions that proved a deeper principle, that precision could outweigh protection if risk was understood rather than feared. On April 24th, Knight flew his final combat mission. The target was a German supply convoy near Gattaco. Trucks and fuel vehicles moving along narrow roads, vulnerable but defended. Knight found the convoy quickly. He strafed, destroyed 6 vehicles, and circled for another pass. Ground fire caught him mid-run. The engine shuddered. Coolant sprayed across the canopy. Temperature spiked. The Thunderbolt was dying. Knight turned south for friendly lines. 5 miles short, the engine seized. Now came the last calculation. He could bail out and risk capture immediately. He could attempt to glide farther and likely crash. Or he could put the aircraft down intact behind enemy lines and attempt to walk out. Knight chose the third option. He dead-sticked the Thunderbolt into a narrow strip of farmland. Perfect belly landing. No fire, no explosion. The aircraft slid to a stop in silence. Knight climbed out, grabbed his sidearm and escape kit, and began walking west. 2 hours later, a German patrol captured him. He was held for 3 days, interrogated, moved between temporary holding points. On April 29th, Allied forces overran the camp. Knight was free. Germany surrendered 5 days later. After the war, Knight returns to Texas, studies engineering, builds roads and bridges, raises a family, speaks little of combat. When asked if he was brave, he says he was thorough. His notebooks reveal the truth. Calculations, geometry, logic. Raymond Knight dies in 2003. No statues, no legend, only doctrine rewritten. Lives saved, problem solved. And that is enough.